Well, good morning and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's showcase. My name is Keith Ayers, CEO of Integro, and today we're going to be focusing on unlocking manager potential and specifically how Everything Disk Management Profile can help you to do that. I was reflecting on my own experience in leadership/management roles, and the first experience I had as being a leader was when I was in the Air Force. I was an officer, but I was a navigator. And I was in Vietnam for a short while, about 4 months, and on the Canberra Bomber Squadron. And each day I would go off on a bombing mission with my pilot, and I'd have to go down to the safety area, and they would give me a parachute that was there in case I needed to jump out. And obviously I was very grateful to these guys because they were packing the parachute. And if I did need it, I'd want it to work. So I actually became quite friendly with these guys down in that safety hut. And but they were airmen and I was an officer. And next thing I got hauled up to the CEO's office, the CO, commanding officer's office, and told I wasn't to fraternise with the airmen. So I thought that was a bit strange because I was really grateful to those guys. And I just thought it was a natural human being thing to do. And then when I got involved with Integro and took a disk profile, I realised that being an SI style, it was only natural that I would want to be friendly. But so we're going to talk about the skills that managers need to have and how we can unlock those skills and unlock the potential. All right, so first of all, let's look at an agenda. But before we actually start on that, just to let you know also, there's a little Q&A box. If you I think it's at the bottom of your screen. You'll have a little, you slide your mouse down there, your cursor, you'll find a little menu pop up and you'll see a Q&A box. If you've got any questions at any time or want to just communicate with us, Jenny's keeping an eye on that for me, and we'll watch out for that on the way through. So the agenda, okay. What is the cost of poor management? And we've looked up a little bit of research on what's happening in Australia there. Secondly, what is the manager's impact on employee engagement? And then we're going to have a look at the Everything Disk Management Profile. We're going to be tying that into a number of other things, so it's not just going through the profile. And then how do we use the profile to significantly increase employee engagement? Okay. So I picked up this quote from Gallup, a new book that they published called It's the Manager. And the research that they've done shows that the quality of managers and team leaders is the single biggest factor in your organisation's long-term success. When you consider the impact that managers have on their teams and their direct reports, and we know from many research studies that have been done on employee engagement that the manager is a big factor in that. So this is one of the biggest global studies Gallup have done, and they published the book just recently. I don't even know if it's available in Australia other than through Amazon, but that's where I bought it. So, so the other thing I want to refer to is the culture. And this little quote here is from the book The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni. Patrick's more famous for his book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. But The Advantage is the only book he's written that's not a fable, like 5 Dysfunctions. And this is a business book. It's a book on how to create a healthy culture. And what he's saying in this little table here is that most businesses are smart about their business. They have everything's strategized. They do marketing. They manage their finances effectively. They use the latest technology. And that's where a lot of management focus is on running a good business. But at the same time, if we're not focused on the culture, it may not be healthy. Do you have minimal politics, minimal confusion? Is there high morale, high productivity, and low employee turnover? So we need to have a balance of that. And so I want to talk to you about how Everything Disk Management and the resources behind that can help you with the healthy side of your culture. Okay, so what's at risk? This is some data we got from doing a little bit of research on what's happening in Australia. The first point is from Seek, that poor management was the #1 reason Australians left their last job. The second point comes from Gartner Global Talent Monitor. The number one driver of attrition among Australian workers in first quarter of 2019 is the lack of respect. Obviously, that has a lot to do with the relationship between the manager and direct report. Does the direct report feel respected? Is there mutual respect? In second place amongst the drivers of attrition was manager quality, or lack of, in the case of people leaving. And then Towers Watson, a global research firm, only 44% of Australian employees said their leaders were effective, compared to 52% of their international counterparts. So, so what are the key functions of a manager? There's a lot. Yes, they're involved in decision-making and problem-solving, have some involvement in hiring. HR might be involved as well, but it would make sense if the hiring manager had some involvement there and actually knew how to do that effectively. Performance evaluation, setting goals, terminating, coaching and development obviously is a big one. And so why do managers struggle with some of these things? And I'm going back to a little model that I learned when I first joined Integro 42 years ago, because Integro was founded as a people skills training company. Integro is actually an abbreviation of interpersonal growth. And what I was introduced to was this idea that managers need to have some kind of knowledge, whether it's technical knowledge or academic knowledge or academic qualifications. Obviously, if you're going to be an accountant, an accountant manager, a financial controller, a CFO, you need accounting knowledge, but you also need experience in terms of how to implement that knowledge to balance the books and create a P&L and balance sheet and all the other things, obviously, that an accounting manager would do. Right? But how do you use that knowledge and those skills? You use them with people, you communicate to people. And so there's a need for people skills. And that was something that was largely missing in the world of management training in the late 70s when I joined Integra in 1977. And I remember that there was a training program that most organizations were using for their managers. And I can't remember the name of it now because it's so long ago, but it was all about planning, controlling, organizing, and delegating, I think, were the four primary skills. And I think also maybe recruitment was part of that. There was nothing much there about how to deal with people. And so that's where Integro's niche was. How do we use the knowledge and skills that we've got more effectively with people? Interestingly enough, we also used exactly the same model with salespeople. Salespeople need to have their product knowledge. They need to know how to go through the sales process to uncover needs and then present solutions and things like that. But then they need to talk to people. So how do I use my product knowledge and my selling skills differently with different people? And of course, that's where this comes in. Okay, that's an essential part of the people skills model. So there are three things that Wiley have identified that managers need insight into. One is their relationships, of course. And we're going to talk a fair bit about that. Obviously, DISC has a lot to do with that. There's also management effectiveness, and there's a part of the Everything DISC management profile that really hones in on that as opposed to the relationship side. But also performance, managing performance. How do we inspire performance and build a team that will go the extra mile? All right, so I'm going to sidestep here into a model that we've developed here at Integro. And I'm doing this because we've identified 5 needs that employees have and the leadership skills or management skills needed to satisfy those needs. But the other research we have behind the passion pyramid is that when these needs are satisfied, employees are far more passionate, not just about what they do, but about the company they work for. And so this ties in a little bit with one of those bits of research we saw earlier about the need for respect. When people leave, it's because they're not respected. The passion pyramid has 5 needs. I'm going to start at the bottom. Obviously, any pyramid, you start at the base. And if you're wondering how I see passionate versus engaged, I think someone who's fully engaged, not only in what they do, but also the company they work for, are actually passionate. They love coming to work and they love what they do. And we've got quite a lot of research in this area too. The number 1 need is respect, the need to be respected. And for managers or leadership skills needed to satisfy that need, obviously, is to build trust and have the people skills to do that, right? And when people feel respected, they get engaged. It might be a basic level of engagement, but it's a starting point, right? The second need is to learn and grow. And we found basically from our research that these needs are important to everybody. I say everybody, almost everybody. Everyone who's normal, in a sense, has a need to learn and grow. And you might be thinking, I know someone who thinks they know it all. Yeah, but it's still a natural need. Why do babies start crawling? Why do they get up and walk? It's instinctive, this need to learn and grow, and they get curious, they want to get into everything. It's natural. It can get switched off by the environment or the culture in an organisation, but it also can be reignited by a manager who has the coaching, counselling and mentoring skills to bring out the best in people. And when they do, obviously you have more talented, skillful employees, right? The third need is to be an insider. See, when people feel respected, they want to learn more so they can contribute more. So they want to get involved more. They want to be involved in problem solving and decision making, coming up with ideas on how we can work better together. And so the manager needs to be able to include people in those conversations. So being inclusive of everybody, getting everybody involved is an important skill for managers as well. And when we get people more involved, we get increased commitment and engagement from them, okay? I should add that this is a pyramid because we don't do one and stop, right? We need to continue to respect people, continue to give them opportunities to learn and grow, and continue to give them opportunities to be involved. And if we don't do the first one well, that is, people don't feel respected, they don't want to learn from you, they don't want to be inside with you, right? They want to separate themselves from you. So all five needs are going to be important. Okay, the fourth need is to do meaningful work. To know that what I'm doing is making a difference. And the biggest thing that makes a difference for people is to know that their purpose, the purpose of the organisation, what the purpose is, and it's meaningful for me to work for a company who is doing something really meaningful, but I can see how I am contributing to that. How do I contribute to the purpose of the organisation through the work that I do? That's when people really light up. Values is a big part too, being proud of the company I work for because of the values that we operate by, and they're not just values on the wall, they're lived by. We bring them up at meetings, we talk about them all the time, we make sure we're continuing to operate by those. So as these needs get satisfied, employees start feeling more emotionally connected to the company, right? And have pride in the company because of their purpose and values and how they see their connection with that. And the last one is the need to be on a winning team. People like to know that they're succeeding and team success. I'm sure if you've had any experience of being on successful teams, whether it's a sporting team or a work team, you know the level of team spirit that develops in the team, and that's passion, right? That's a really passionate employee. And so then when you've got that level of need satisfaction, you will have passionate employees. But the leader's very much involved in building that high-performing team and continuing to coach and mentor and make sure they're in alignment and so on. Okay, so we're going to see how the Everything Disc management profile can help managers develop the skills to satisfy these needs and create more passionate employees. Okay, so let's have a look at Everything Disc management. And first of all, in relationships, how critical are they? Well, our own research with our employee passion survey has identified that 34% of employees are passionate about their work and get great satisfaction from knowing they make a difference. However, they are disengaged from the organisation because they don't feel their contribution is valued. And that's a specific part of that assessment that they're responding to. They don't feel their contribution is valued. 34%, these are people who are really engaged in their work, but they're not engaged in the company. Which means they're more likely to leave if another offer comes up. They're more likely to be looking around. They're less likely to go the extra mile, to put out discretionary effort rather than just doing what they need to do. Another 20% of employees are emotionally disconnected from both the work and the organisation. So they're really on the prowl probably for somewhere else to work. So that's over half the organisation that are emotionally disconnected from the company. And we've seen that percentage decrease significantly when organisations really focus in on building trust with their employees and increasing their passion. Okay, so let's focus on relationships. The starting point, and DISC obviously is a great tool for that, is to understand yourself. And so when the manager takes you within this management profile, they get a profile with their dot placement and their shaded area for their priorities, and get a really good understanding of their needs and their priorities, and how that might affect the way they manage. We'll see in a little while how that shows up in the management profile. But the second part is to understand others. We need to learn about our direct reports, DISC styles, and their go-to behaviours and priorities. And in some organisations, if the management profile is used without actually profiling the direct reports, the managers are trained in people reading skills, and so they can still apply this by using the people reading process to identify the style of their direct reports. Obviously, it would be more effective if the employees had done the workplace profile as well. So then understand myself, understanding others, now we can build more effective relationships. So let's have a look at all styles. Doesn't matter where your dot falls, you can be an effective manager, because being an effective manager requires using all 4 styles at different times, adapting to relate to the different styles of each person. So it doesn't matter what your starting point is, if you're adaptable enough, you can be an effective manager, right? So let's look at the priorities, and I'm going to use an S style here as an example. So this S style manager has a need, a primary priority for support, secondary for collaboration, and the third priority would be reliability for the CSSC scale, right? That's what this manager would likely focus on. But obviously, when they're relating to someone who is a CDDC style on their team, right? That person would have a number 1 priority of challenging things. And so they might be very challenging to that manager, and questioning things and being skeptical about things. And so it's really vital that this S-style manager would understand how to deal with that person. And that's obviously what the profile is designed to help them with, okay? So in order to focus on relationships, managers need to balance the communication needs of different styles, and also the needs that all people have, the need to be respected, the need to learn and grow, and so on, all right? Focusing on satisfying their needs. I've had managers at times over the years say to me, why do we have to satisfy their needs? We pay them, don't we? You think pay is the only need people have? I actually had a personnel manager, he was called at the time, say that to me. Why do we need to give people recognition? We pay them, don't we? But not a good attitude for a personnel manager. But he was a very strong DC style, so he was more inclined on the task than he was towards people. So the second thing that we need to focus on is the why. How does the employee's work contribute to your organisation's purpose? Do you have a purpose statement that is inspirational to your employees, and so they can really want to be connected to that and see how what they're doing is contributing to that? And the manager also needs to be a role model of your organisation's culture. If you've got a set of values on the wall, your manager's actually operating by those values and demonstrating that they are, and discussing those values with their teams at a team meeting at least every so often, not necessarily every week, but maybe at least every month or so. Let's remind our team about why we're here, what's the purpose of our organisation, and how do we contribute to that, and what are the values that we've committed to operating by, okay? So let's move on to effectiveness, and we're going to talk about micromanagement. Some research here. People who, I think this is a Gallup statement, people who believe they're being micromanaged perform at lower levels, and they learn helplessness, all right? So there's no point in trying anything different, because I'm going to just have to do things the way I'm told, and I'm going to be watched all the time. And that builds up resentment and poor communication, disloyalty, low engagement. I remember running a workshop while I was in the States some time ago, and I had a manager who said, but we have to micromanage our people. And I said, why? because they've got to do everything correctly. And I said, do you mean they don't do things correctly if you're not micromanaging them? She said, well, I don't know. I said, how often do people make mistakes? Well, I don't think they make them very often. So there was no logic behind the argument. It was just actually more a need to be in control and not trust people that was resulting in that micromanaging behavior. So what happens here is that employees start to leave. Okay, I want to introduce a model, and we call it the personal responsibility model. Will actually help us understand why people micromanage. What's the psychology behind it, right? And before I have a look at that, I just want to ask you the question: what kinds of people do you need in your organisation for your organisation to be successful? Or what kinds of people do you need in your team for your team to be successful? And when I ask leaders this question, these are the kinds of answers that come up. They want people who are talented, hardworking, active, decisive, enthusiastic, conscientious, successful, creative, competent, self-starters, reliable, good listeners, etc., team players. So these are all of the answers I get. I've asked literally maybe a couple of hundred groups this question over the years, maybe more than that. I've even had groups of union leaders talking about improving relationships. And I've asked them the same question: what kinds of people do you need? And they come up with the same answers, right? And so the question is, how do we create an environment where we get those people? Because if you look at those words, I'm sure you will know that there's some people in your organisation who are like that, at least part of the time, maybe even a lot of the time, but maybe not all of the time. And I'm sure you have people, or you've come across people, or you had people who you wish they were like this some of the time. All right. So how do we get these people? Well, let's look at the personal responsibility model. If you've been on any of our training over the years, you would have heard the name Ralph Colby. He was one of the founders of Integra, Dr. Ralph Colby. He created the trust model. He created the people skills model, the whole person concept. He was really good at building conceptual models, and this is his way of helping people understand the idea of locus of control. You're probably familiar with that term. Is the locus of control of your life inside you or outside of you, external or internal? Right. So an external focus of control would mean that you were other directed, that you would be directed by others external to you. An internal locus of control would mean that you are self-directed, that you're in charge of your own life. Okay. So other directed people believe that they're controlled by outside authorities, and self-directed people believe that they're autonomous. Autonomous comes from the ancient Greek. Auto means self, nomos means a law unto myself. Okay. So what causes the direction you go in here? And you could even look at this from the way you leave home in the morning. Do you leave home in the morning saying, I hope nothing bad happens to me today? Or do you leave home in the morning saying, I'm going to have a great day. I can't control everything that's going to happen, but I'm going to know how to handle it. All right? Because I'm in charge of my own life. So the belief of the other directed person is that I have to do what I'm told. I have to do this. You hear them saying it. Oh, no, I can't do that. I have to do this kind of language. Okay. Whereas the self-directed person believes that they choose. I always have a choice. Other directed person says, I have to go to work because I have to earn money. Well, if that's the attitude you come to work with, you're probably not very passionate or committed, because I have to be here. And it's sort of like a negative thing. Whereas the self-directed person chooses to work here. And if they decide to work somewhere else, they choose to move, right? Because they're in charge. I want to go down the other directed side first and just look at this in relation to a manager asking an employee to do something that's not in their job description. So the other directed person's thinking is, I have to comply, or no way, I'm not doing this. They're going to rebel. Right? The feeling that flows from that thinking on the comply side is resentment, and on the rebel side is resistance. So the person whose thinking is to rebel typically won't tell you they're not going to do it. They just don't get it done. So you check in on them, how's it going, and there's all these excuses, right? Because they're resisting doing it. I'm sure you've had people like that. I hope you don't have them anymore, but that's a common thing. And then the people who are doing it and don't think they should be doing it are feeling resentful. Either way, the attitude is, I'm not responsible for this. And so even if they do what you've asked them to do, it may not be up to the standard that you want, because they're not doing it with energy and passion. and commitment. Right? It's grudgingly. And so the behavior you're going to see, oops, we've got the American version here without a U. They're going to act like a victim, or they're going to get revenge, and maybe both. Because when they feel like a victim, that resentment really builds up, and then they may turn to revenge. We see some really interesting answers to that question. We ask, what kind of things do people in your organization do to get revenge? And sometimes they sabotage, sometimes they just go slow. The biggest form of revenge is people holding back on giving you their best. They disengage and go through the motions. It's their way of getting back because I don't have a say. I don't have a choice. I have to do what I'm told. Now that's what the micromanager is achieving. They're forcing compliance. They may get some rebellion, but they're going to get a lot of resentment and a lot of people who are not feeling responsible for what they do. They're not accountable. They won't take ownership, and they're switching off and just going through the motions. Now, ultimately, someone who is self-directed, working for a micromanager, is going to leave because they choose not to work in that environment, and so we have increased turnover. All right. So let's go back to the self-directed person and look at what do they do when you ask them to do something that's not on their job description. The thinking is, well, I can agree or disagree. Now, a self-directed person, we'll find in a moment, is someone who's very responsible, and they're not going to disagree unless there's a very good reason for disagreeing, in which case I'll tell you why they disagree. But if you ask them to do something reasonable, they're going to agree. Either way, their feeling is to accept the consequences of their decision. Right? So if I disagree and there are negative consequences, well, I own that. I knew I had a choice. I knew what the consequences would be. And so I'll accept them. And either way, the attitude is to be responsible. Now, I see responsibility and accountability as a little bit different, and accountability is the behaviour here. People will not be accountable unless they take responsibility. Responsibility is the internal decision, right? It's a mindset. It's like, I accept responsibility for this, and now I can be accountable, and I'll deliver on that. So when you hear managers saying, I'm holding you accountable for that, we're talking about authoritarian behaviour that's going to lead to the left-hand side. Accountability is a choice. People choose to be accountable. They choose to be responsible. You can't force people. The more you try to force people, the more you push them down the other directed side. So if you want accountable, responsible people, you need to create an environment where people have a choice, where they have a say. All right. Now let's go back to the list of words that we came up with for what kinds of people do you need. And then these are the words that I've come up with every group I've worked with. And there's nothing in this list that is other directed. I've never met a manager who really wants other directed people. I actually did meet one who said that he needed compliant people. He was a senior manager for Cochlear, and he was in charge of the clean rooms where they make the ear implants. And he said, our people have to be compliant. They have to make every ear implant perfectly. Of course they do, right? But do you do it by being an authoritarian and go around watching everybody and looking over their shoulder? Or do you trust them and encourage them to do the job perfectly every time? I'd rather the latter. I'd rather a self-directed team of people who are just in there passionate about making these ear implants and knowing the impact it's going to have on the recipient without someone having to look over their shoulder and micromanage them. Okay, so we don't have to be authoritarian to get compliance with high standards. Okay. All right, so let's look at the second phase of, we looked at relationships, we're now going to look at manager effectiveness. So we're going to dive into the first application in the management profile here, which is directing and delegating. And in each section, I hope you can see that okay. I'm going to expand it a little bit in just a second, but you'll see this is a page in the management profile for directing and delegating. And in each section, each application, the first page is how do you tend to direct and delegate as a manager based on your style. So this person is an I style. They've got an extra priority on S. So how are they likely to direct and delegate using that style? And so how do you approach it? What are your strengths? What are your potential challenges in delegating? Right. So looking at myself, self-awareness. Right. Then after that, they go into 4 pages on directing and delegating, one for each of the 4 styles. This one is for how do I direct and delegate to an S style, right? And so how do I be effective with the S style, and how do I need to adapt to do that, all right? And then the other part that we're looking on this page is adapting my directing and delegating to the experience of the person that I'm dealing with here. This might remind you of situational leadership, where we talked about the maturity of different people and how we need to adapt our leadership approach. Here we're talking about how do I adapt to the person's DISC style, but also to their level of experience, all right? And in using this and facilitating this material with managers, they're going to identify a specific employee on their team, a direct report, that they would like to do more directing or delegating with and be more effective with this person. And then they'll use this information to build an action plan by turning to the page of the person's style and using the information there, okay? So that sort of ties in with the effectiveness part of this 3-step process. Are you effective as a manager in the way you direct and delegate the distribution of work and getting tasks done, all right? So let's move on to performance. And poor performance is often linked to poor engagement, right? So let's look at engagement. According to Gallup, managers account for 70% of employee engagement, right? That fits with Daniel Goleman's research also in the book Primal Leadership, that 70% of how people feel about coming to work is directly related to their immediate manager or supervisor and the climate that they create, okay? So it's a big responsibility, right? Our own research at Integro here, which I pointed out earlier, that more than 50% of employees are emotionally disconnected from the organisation. So they could be engaged in their work, but if they're disconnected from the organisation, switched off, results in employee turnover, lower levels of commitment to providing quality work, and also lower levels of commitment to providing good customer satisfaction, okay? And that's damaging. All right, so we're going to look at these last 2 application areas in the management profile, and how do they relate to these needs, the need to be respected, the need to learn and grow, need to be an insider, etc. Now, obviously, if I understand the DISC styles of my team, I know that they all need to be respected, but for different things. They have different needs. So I can learn to apply that. In terms of developing people to learn and grow, developing their skills, again, different skill sets, different development plans, etc. Okay, so let's go to motivation section. Again, the first page in the motivation section looks at how do you tend to motivate people based on your style. Obviously, this I style person would be enthusiastic and encouraging and collaborative, but and that's great if that motivates people, right? But we also will discuss with them at that part of the program, how might you demotivate? So is your natural tendency to motivate people going to work for the C style or the CD style or the D style, the opposite side of where your dot sits? So how do you adapt to do that more effectively? Okay, and so this example shows this I-style manager looking at how do I adapt to motivate this C-style direct report. Okay, so let's blow that up. So how can you create a motivating environment for the C-style? And what's the best way for you to recognize and reward the C-style? That would be really different from how they would want to be recognized and rewarded themselves, being an I-style, okay? So the whole focus of this is on adapting your style to be more effective with each of your direct reports, right? And a big part of this is the conversations that they're having with them as well. So let's look at the developing others part. This is the third application in the management profile. Again, how do you tend to approach developing others based on your style? What are the advantages and disadvantages of your approach? And then let's look at, in this case, we're saying an I-style with an I-style. So it doesn't have to adapt very much. What are the areas where this I-style has strong potential? And obstacles and strategies in the development process, right? So, so that's the the part of the management profile that really ties in with all of those needs. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, it's really about the conversations they're having, making managers more skillful at sitting down and having the most appropriate conversation with this particular person by taking into account, hey, what is the goal here? Is it to motivate them? Is it to develop them? Am I directing or delegating to them? And how do I adapt that to have a conversation that's going to be more meaningful for each direct report? Okay, so Richard Branson was quoted recently as saying, train people well enough so they can lead, but treat them well enough so they don't want to. One of the things that I've found in working with one of our clients in Brisbane who's been focusing on creating a healthy culture for 4 years now and measuring that and training all of their managers in the use of the management profile, including building KPIs into their performance goals as to the results of their the impact on the culture of them focusing more on each direct report, is that employee turnover has dropped dramatically. In the restaurant kitchen area, for example, turnover, retention is now 97%. It's 98% in housekeeping. They're the room attendants who clean your room, right? They're exceptionally low retention figures. High retention figures, low turnover figures for an industry that's typically high turnover. But the effort has gone in over a 4-year period to make sure their managers not only have the skills to develop people and motivate people, but making sure they're focusing on it by including it as part of their KPIs. Okay. So another quote from Gallup. Companies and organisations with higher than average engagement see 27% higher profits and 38% higher productivity. All right, so the Everything Disc Profile Facilitator Kit, it's got a fully scripted facilitator's guide. It's a Word document, so you can edit it too if you want to. It's got customizable PowerPoint. They're all templates. You can customise the PowerPoints with your own colour schemes, your own logos. The videos are built into the PowerPoint, and the management profile kit is currently being updated. There will be a new version released over the next few months. We don't know exactly when. They're shooting all new videos, but don't let that hold you back from getting started, because if you were to purchase a kit or you already have a kit with the current lot of videos, etc., when the new one comes out, you will automatically get the upgrades. You will just be sent a link and you will download them and the whole new kit with all the new videos for free. There's no charge for an upgrade, okay? So there are 6 modules in this facilitator kit, each of them designed to be about 90 minutes in length. You theoretically could run it in 1 day, but I think that would be too much. My recommendation after using this with various clients is do the initial section, which is taking people through the management profile, pages 1 to 6. They're very similar to pages 1 to 6 in the workplace profile, up to motivators and stressors, different content, of course. And then one of the applications, and I like to use motivation first. So I'll do the front section, page 1 to 6, and then I'll do motivation. And that's sort of a full-on half day, maybe a little bit more than a half day, and then come back to do the other modules at a later time. So you building skills and getting them to go practice it and then come back and learn some more. Make it a process rather than an event. Okay. One of the other tools that's really valuable, obviously, in follow-up and keeping DISC alive is myeverythingdisc.com. So you can also upload the management profile into myeverythingdisc.com, and the manager can then create comparison reports with their direct reports if they have done an Everything Disc workplace profile. One of our clients is using it that way. They're using the management profile as a leadership training tool. Why? It's a management tool. Well, management is one-on-one skills, and when we ask the client, what are the skills that you want your leaders to have as a result of doing this leadership training? The response was better quality conversations. I want our leaders to be able to sit down and have really good conversations with their direct reports and build relationships and have each person developing their skills and so on. That's what the management profile does. It's one-on-one skills. The leadership profiles are about the leader working with a group of people without looking at the individual styles of each person. Just where are we taking this group, okay? So yes, it can be used in leadership training if that's the goal, one-on-one skills, okay? And then this client puts all the direct reports through the workplace profile as well, and then requires as part of the training for the manager to generate a comparison report with each direct report, and then follow that up with some activities for the manager to do with each direct report, and then report back at the next leadership training session, right? So that they're actually getting them to use the tools to become more effective leaders, okay? So that's sort of where almost up to the thank you slide here. But if you have not taken a management profile and you would like to give it a try, contact us, support@integro.com.au. Ask us for an access code and we'd be happy to organise for you to take it to get a personal experience of it. Okay, so let's throw it open to questions. I'm going to check with Jenny and see if we've got any questions. Oh, I mentioned I was going to talk about the disagreeing part of self-directed. Good question. Didn't I talk about that? Okay. Yeah. Someone who's self-directed, as you will see going back to the model, is responsible. And I did say that they're not going to disagree just for the sake of disagreeing. They're going to disagree if they don't agree with what they're being asked to do. Now, the reasons they're likely to be disagreeing is that they don't think they're the right person to do it. Look, I really think that that's not my skill set. And I think someone else on the team may actually be better at that. Or it may be the manager's asking them to do something that they don't believe is right. All right, they're asking them to do something that is not in alignment with the organisation's values. And that does happen, right? So that's the kind of thing I would say is where the self-directed person would disagree. And another point I'd make on that, the micromanager or the authoritarian control-based manager who operates on the other directed side tends to see disagreement as rebellion, right? And I have had a manager say to me, but employees can't disagree, they've got to do what they're told. And I said, well, that's fine if you want other directed employees. Right? One of the things we talk about a lot in the 5 behaviours program, you know, trust is the foundation of the 5 behaviours model. The second behaviour is productive conflict or healthy conflict, right? It's really critical that people can disagree with things that they don't agree with or don't think are right, or they don't think it's the best decision, right? The company Intel, you all know Intel. You've probably, I can see a little badge on Jenny's computer here, Intel Inside, right? What does that mean? It's got a really good quality processor in it, right? And one of the mantras of Intel, when people go to meetings, every employee is being indoctrinated with this, that when you go to a meeting, disagree and commit. You can disagree as much as you like, as long as you commit to the decision that's made at the end of the meeting when you leave, right? And that you're committed to following through on it. So it's the same in 5 behaviours. And what we learned from the different styles, DISC styles, is the D style has absolutely no problem saying, I disagree. The S style really struggles with it, right? Because it feels like confrontation. Okay, I know that from personal experience. As I said, I'm an SI, and yes, I have an extra priority on the action or the DI scale, but I still primarily S, and it's hard for me to say I disagree. I've learned how to do it, and I'm getting better at it. Alicia's good at helping me with that, but because Alicia's a DI style. And yeah, does that answer your question? Yeah, okay. The question here is, what do you suggest for direct reports of the manager to do? Is it workplace and why? Yes, it is workplace. Workplace is the best starting point, even for managers. In fact, I would say the ideal way to implement this would be the manager would do the workplace profile with their direct reports. So we'd all do the same profile, because the workplace profile is focused on you as a person and your relationships. It's not bringing any hierarchical difference in, right? When the manager does the management profile and they read your doc tells a story on page 4, it's describing them as a manager. So they're thinking of themselves as a manager. Initially, I want them to think of themselves as a person and how do they relate to others in their team. Not how do they manage them, how do they relate to them, how do they communicate with them, right? And then the management profile would be a second stage for all the managers to do, so that then they can go back and apply the management skills with their direct reports. I haven't mentioned it hasn't been brought up in the slides either, but there is a fourth application in the management profile, and it's working with your manager. So there's a section that says, how do you naturally tend to relate to your manager based on your style? And then how should you adapt to relate to a D style manager, an I style manager, S and C? So taking your manager's style into consideration. I've got a question here about suggested books to read. Well, Primal Leadership, Daniel Goleman, it's an old one, but it's still extremely relevant today. And it's about emotional intelligence and more self-awareness and then more self-management. And the management profile certainly is directly applicable to all 4 emotional competencies, helping yourself become more aware about yourself as a manager and how you naturally tend to do things. How do you need to manage your emotions and your behavior to adapt to behave differently with different direct reports? How do your direct reports behave? What are the needs and feelings that drive their behavior? That's more social awareness, awareness of others. And then relationship management is the 4th competence. How do I use this information to build stronger work relationships with my direct reports? Okay. Any other questions? Anything in the chat box?
That's it.
Okay.
Just a thank you.
Well, if you have any other questions, please feel free to get back to us. And anytime, we've got a team of people, most of us in the S quadrant, so we love providing support. We love it when people call in, and we look forward to talking to you sometime soon. Thanks again.